A Rabbinic Anthology, selected by C.G. Montefiore and Herbert Lowe. In Psalm 36, God is praised and thanked for his wonders, which he has wrought for Israel, and especially for the cleaving of the Red Sea. A literal translation is Reed Sea, but the same refrain, for his loving kindness is forever, is applied to the words, who gives bread to all flesh. Same source, page 25. Selection 115, Pes R 152a. So Hillel said that this juxtaposition showed that the two deeds of God were equal in greatness, and that the giving to man of his daily bread was as wonderful a marvel as the cleaving of the Red Sea. In biblical Hebrew, which the name of the language is spelled in English Armya, so Aramaic in actuality, Yimsuf, is that how you say it? But, it's tidal marsh, not the Red Sea. The level of hurricane that would be required and the mountain climbing skills to go across that one. And, very ingenuously, it is said that the same equivalence is shown by Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1, 14, and 15, where after the words, his bread fails not, come the words, I am the Lord who divided. AV literally stirs up the Red Sea. Again, Reed Sea. Pes R 152a. Selection 116. Ton B D Ton DB L, page 53. My Father, who art in heaven, may thy great name be blessed from all eternity, and may Israel, thy servants, give thee pleasure. Thou art he who redeems and rescues all the inhabitants of the world, and all the work of thy hands. I may quote here some stories about animals. 117, Exodus R, Shemot 2:2. While Moses was feeding the sheep of his father-in-law in the wilderness, a young kid ran away. Moses followed it until it reached a ravine, where it found a well to drink from. When Moses reached it, he said, I did not know that you ran away because you were thirsty. Now you must be weary. He carried the kid back. Then God said, because thou hast shown pity in leading back one of a flock belonging to a man, thou shalt lead my flock, Israel. Exodus R, Shemot 2:2. Remember, Israel kind of translates to Mujahideen. It's an equivalent, because those who struggle for God and those who strive for the system of judgment, of God. Same basic thing. The rendering ravine is uncertain. The word in the ordinary text is obscure and may be corrupt. HL. Selection 118 from Gen R. Nawach 33 3. The page 305. Bab M 85a. Once our Judah the prince sat and taught the law before an assembly of Babylonian Jews in Sepphoris, and a calf passed before him. It came and sought to conceal itself and began to move, as if to say, save me. Then he said, what can I do for you? For this lot, i.e. to be slaughtered, you were created. Hence, our Judah suffered toothache for 13 years. After that, a reptile, perhaps a weasel, their way of expressing a reptile apparently was a bit broader, right? Ran past his daughter, and she wanted to kill it. He said to her, "Let it be, for it is written, his mercies are over all his works." So it was said in heaven, because he had pity, pity should be shown to him, and his toothache ceased. Gen R. Noach 33.3, the page 305, Bab M 85A. And one of the things about that is one of the things that the Muslim rulers of the Persians or Iranians, or whichever term you're going to use, maybe there's something else, Aryans, was that they didn't allow the people to wander about trying to exterminate the species that they didn't like. Now, if there was a snake in your home or in a danger to you on your way about, but you didn't, they outlawed the going around trying to hunt down the things. Kill an animal for food, but not, "Oh, I don't like this species to exist." It's like, yeah, there are Persians who believe that, whether they're allowed to do it where they live or not. As regards Exodus 12:29, and all the firstborn of cattle, it is said, 119 Pesche 65b, if the human beings sinned, what was the sin of the cattle? But the Egyptians worshipped certain animals, and so that they should not say, "Our God brought this punishment upon us," or "How strong is our God, for he stood up for himself," so that the plague should not have power over him. Therefore the cattle were included. See also our selection 144, which I don't know, we may get to in this program. 120 is TJ Dem 1, section 3, folio 22A, line 7. R. Phinehas B. Jair went to a place where they said, "The mice eat our grain." He conjured the mice, and they gathered together and squeaked. He said to the men, "Do you know what they say?" They replied, "No." He said to them, "They say it has not been properly tithed." They said to him, "Pledge thyself to us that the mice will not eat our grain if we tithe it properly." And he did pledge himself to them, and they suffered no longer. Wow, things are overflowing, and they get into that. TJ Dem 1, section 3, folio 22A, line 7. Now, in Islamic law, there's a certain requirement of food storage, that's been had a year, and other stuff too. Basically like a year's supply, though. So anybody with less than a year's supply, or is it 2 years equivalent or something? But, now it's good to give in charity, but, and now the government takes so much, it's understandable. Phinehas B. Jair was noted for the stories of this type, 889, 1066, and 1359. Later in this book, selection 121, TJ Dem 1, section 3, folio 21D, line 69 to 22A, the initial. See also 120. Some robbers stole the donkey of R. Phinehas B. Jair and kept it hidden for 3 days, during which time it ate nothing. After that time, they decided to restore it to its master. It is better, they said, to send it back than that it should die here and make our cave smell. So they let it go, and it went to the gate of its master and began to bray. "Open the gate," he said, "to this poor animal which has eaten nothing for 3 days." They put barley before it, but it would not eat. They said to our Pinchas, it refuses to eat. He said, have you properly sifted the barley? They said, yes. He said, have you tithed that part of the barley which possibly was not tithed? They said, no. For you have taught us that he who buys cereals for sowing are to give to animals, our rough flour for tanning skins, our oil for lamps, our for cleaning vessels, is free from the obligation of tithing, the doubtfully untithed. He said, yes, but this poor animal imposes upon itself a very strict rule. So they took away the doubtful tithe, and it ate. T.J. Dem 1, Section 3, Folio 21D, line 69 to 22A, initial. See also our 120th selection. Oh, the previous one. 122 from PES R 56B, finished to 57A. Once upon a time, an Israelite who owned a plowing heifer became poor and sold her to a pagan. I presume it means Gentile, because pagan, heathen, infidel aren't really categories of religion. He took her and plowed with her during the weekdays. On the Sabbath, he brought her out as before to plow. Remember, the Sabbath starts on Friday sunset and ends on Saturday sunset. But she lay down under the yoke. Though he beat the heifer, she would not budge. Seeing this, he went to the Israelite who had sold the heifer and said, come and take your heifer. Perhaps she is grieving for her former owner. For though I beat her, she will not move. The Israelite understood that the reason why the heifer would not plow was because it was the Sabbath day on which she was accustomed to rest. So he said to the pagan, I will come and raise her. When he came, he whispered into her ear, heifer, heifer, you know well that when you were mine, you plowed all the week and you rested on the Sabbath. But now, through my sins, you have passed to a pagan master. I beseech you, rise and plow. The heifer did so at once. The pagan then said to him, I beg you, take your cow away, because I cannot always come to fetch you to raise her. But now I will not leave you until you tell me what you did to her in her ear. I wearied myself with her and beat her, but she would not give up. The Israelite then began to appease him and said, it was neither witchcraft nor magic that I did, but thus and thus did I whisper in her ear, so that she rose and plowed. At once the pagan was struck by fear and said, if a heifer, which has no speech and no sense, could recognize her maker, shall not I, whom the Creator formed in his own image, and to whom he gave understanding, acknowledge him? Straightway he went and became a proselyte. He studied and acquired the merit of Torah, and they used to call him John, son of the heifer. And at this day our rabbis pronounce rulings which he gave. Now, if you are astonished that a heifer should bring a man under the wings of the Shekinah, reflect that it is through a heifer that Israel can be purified. Numbers 19, 1 to 10. And we need to remember that the idea that people couldn't convert was a later development. The whole thing, you weren't supposed to marry somebody who turned their back on God or that sort of stuff. But that referred to secular Jews too, so anybody who turned was accepted. Initially, some groups definitely made it. but you could wander from one place to another and say you were a Jew. So if they didn't accept you, you could just move the town over and, 123, Geth 62a finish. Our Judah said, in the name of Rab, a man is forbidden to eat anything until he has fed his beast. Get 62a fin. Cruelty to animals was given a special term by the rabbis. Tzar Bal Chayim, which literally means afflicting anything possessed of life. HL. Selection 124 from Tunchby Noach 15a, C 111, 150, and 1172. Our Tanshuma B. Abba cited Proverbs 11:30. He that is wise wins souls. The rabbis said this refers to Noah, for in the ark he fed and sustained the animals with much care. He gave to each animal its special food and fed each at its proper period, some in the daytime and some at night. And thus he gave chopped straw to the camel, barley to the donkey, vine tendrils to the elephant, and glass to the ostrich. So for 12 months he did not sleep by night or day, because all the time he was busy feeding the animals. Tunch B. Noach 15a, C 111, 150, and 1172. And selection 125, Mech Amalek Yitro, section 1, page 195, Mech, section 3, volume 2, page 178. In every hour the Shekinah provides sustenance for all the inhabitants of the world according to their need, and satisfies every living thing, and not only the pious and the righteous, but also the wicked and the idolaters. Mech Amalek Yitro 195, Mech 3 to 178, selection 126 from Gen R Bereshit 29th, page 192. R. Elazar said, sustenance is put side by side with redemption, and redemption with sustenance, as it is said, he has redeemed us from our enemies, and immediately afterwards he gives food to all flesh. Psalm 136, verses 24 and 25. As redemption is marvelous, so sustenance is marvelous. As sustenance is day by day, so redemption is day by day. R. Samuel B. Nachman said, sustenance is even greater than redemption, for the latter can be effected through an angel, as it is said, the angel which redeemed me from all evil. Genesis 48, verse 16. But sustenance comes only through God. Thou openest thy hand, and in thy favor satisfiest every living thing. Psalm 145:16. Gen R Bereshit 29, page 192. Naturally, the details of God's goodness are often pictured in terms of the law, even when the Israelites as such are not specifically mentioned. Selection 127, Midrash Psalm on 30, heading 117a, section 2. A difficult verse in Job 41, verse 11 is quoted. Who has anticipated me that I should pay him? That is, who purposed in his heart to do a command, and I did not previously requite him. Who circumcised, and I had not given him a son? Who made fringes, and I had not before given him a mantle? Who made a railing to his roof, and I had not previously given him a house? Who purposed in his heart to do a command, and was prevented from doing it, and I did not reckon it to him as if he had done it? The rabbis, usually, it is true, speak as members of the people of Israel. They usually have Israel consciously before their minds, and prevailingly too, the opposition between Israel and the nations of the world, who are Israel's enemies, and as idolaters, are also God's enemies. That is the rabbinic particularism, to which the particularism of the church fathers is a close parallel. But God is also the creator and Lord of the whole world, and so the rabbis, forgetting or ignoring for the time being the opposition between Israel and the nations, frequently speak about human beings generally and of God's relation to them. On such occasions, they often employ the word birya, creature, as in the following. Selection 128, Exodus R, Wa'era 9:1. R. Pinhas B. Chama Ha Kohen quoted the words of Isaiah 46:10, "All my pleasure I will do." What do these words mean? They mean that God's pleasure is to justify his creatures, or to lead his creatures to righteousness, as it says, the Lord was pleased for his righteousness' sake to magnify the law and make it honorable. Isaiah 42:21, and he has no pleasure in condemning a creature, as it says, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Ezekiel 33:11, Exodus R, Wa'ara 9:1. The word birya is strikingly used in Avith 6:2, prayer book, page 205. Hear the woe to mankind, biryoth, for the contempt of the Torah, and the rest of the two sections would imply that all mankind can learn from Torah and derive perfection therefrom, not merely Israel alone. H.L. 129. God is on the watch for the nations of the world to repent, so that he may bring them under his wings. Num R. Nassau 10:1 was that selection. This phrase, which means to become a proselyte, ger, is derived from Ruth 2:12. See selection 1574 when we get to that. Selection 130 from Num R. Nassau 10:1. It is written, his mouth is most sweet. Canticles 5:16. See what it says, seek ye me and live. Amos 5:4. Can there be a sweeter mouth than this? And it says, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. Ezekiel 33:11. Can there be a sweeter mouth than this? Yea, let the wicked turn from his way and live. Can there be a sweeter mouth than this? Num R. Nassau 10:1. It is a well-known and remarkable passage from the Mishnah. It is Israelite criminals who, no doubt, may be referred to, but it is perhaps not unfair to give to the words a wider reference. Selection 131, Sen 6:5, Dan B, page 390. R. Me'er said, when man is sore troubled, the Shekinah says, how heavy is my head, how heavy is my arm. If God suffers so much for the blood of the wicked, how much more for the blood of the righteous? If the world were ruled by God according to the strictest dictates of justice, man could not endure. For man cannot endure, did I say, Danby? because I want to make sure that the quotes are, that's made clear what those are. 132, Gen R, Leka, 39, 6, the, page 368, 198, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Genesis 18:25, R.Loewe said, Abraham said to God, if thou desirest to maintain the world, strict justice is impossible, and if thou desirest strict justice, then the world cannot be maintained. Thou canst not hold the cord at both ends at once. Thou desirest the world, and thou desirest justice. Take one or the other, unless thou art a little indulgent. The world cannot endure. Gen R. Leka, 39:6, the page 368. See also our selection 198 when we get to that. And we need to remember that we don't per se know that, lawful attainment isn't going to be available and everything. Selection 133, Gen R, Wayera, 49:9, the page 510. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Genesis 18:25. R. Judah B. Simeon said, Abraham pleaded thus, among mortal men, an appeal lies from the ducks to the eparch, and from the eparch to the commander-in-chief. But as no appeal lies from thee, shall not the judge of all the world do right? When thou didst desire to judge thy world, thou didst deliver it into the hands of two, Remus and Romulus, so that if one sought to do anything wrong, the other could restrain him. But seeing that none can restrain thee, shall not the judge of all the world do right? Gen R. Wayera, 49:9, the page 510. The reference seems to be to the power of one consul to veto the decisions of his colleague. Selection 134, Lev R. Tazau, 10:1. R. Udon in the name of R. Azariah said, when Abraham prayed to God to show compassion upon the men of Sodom, he said, Thou hast sworn never to bring again a flood of water upon the earth. Dost thou now propose to bring a flood of fire, and so cleverly to evade the earth? Thou canst not get out of the oath, as it is said, Far be it from thee to do after this manner. Shall not the judge of all the earth do justice? Yet if thou wantest justice, then the world cannot stand. But if thou wantest the world to endure, then justice cannot stand, i.e. then thou canst not have perfect justice. Thou seekest to grasp the cord by both ends at once. Thou desirest to maintain the world, and thou desirest truthful judgment. If thou dost not yield a little, thy world cannot endure. Then God said to Abraham, Thou lovest justice and hatest evil. Psalm 45:7. Thou lovest to justify my creatures, and thou hatest to declare them guilty. Therefore hast God anointed thee with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. Psalm 45:7. Note 21. Lev R. Tazau 10:1. On the other hand, the rabbis, just because they so constantly emphasize the mercy of God, how his compassion exceeds his justice, and just because they speak so often, as we shall hear, of his exceeding love for Israel, are very anxious to point out that we must not presume upon this compassion and love. God's goodness is something very different from mere lax good nature. Such remarks as the following are not infrequent. Selection 135, Bab K 50A Fin. R. Chanina said, "He who says God is indulgent, his life shall be outlawed." Section 136, T.J. Sheck, it's a dot below the K. 5, Section 2, Folio 48D, line 35. Archanina said, "He who says that God is lax, his bowels shall be relaxed. God is long-suffering, but he exacts his due. He is particular to a hair's breadth. His strictness is greater for the near than for the far, i.e. the righteous, than for the sinful." T.J. Sheck, 5, 2, 48, 35. God is not only the merciful Father, but he is the just judge. The saying of Akiba is famous. He used to say, and before we get into selection 137, which is from Aboth 320 per book, page 194, the last one proves that not all the Jews are saying that God is stingy, because definitely there's the teaching against it. And the Quran doesn't say that all the Jews do this either, so it's just, some particular individuals, and I think we actually have some names of them were being referenced by that verse. Of course, things are broader, right? There continues to be people that everything is given on pledge, and a net is spread for all the living. The shop is open, and the dealer gives credit, and the ledger lies open, and the hand writes, and whosoever wishes to borrow may come and borrow. But the collectors regularly make their daily round, and exact payment from man, whether he be content or not, and they have that whereon they can rely in their demand. And the judgment is a judgment of truth, and everything is prepared for the feast. Aboth 320 per book, page 194. For an explanation of the various metaphors in this passage, see Charles Tyler's note in his second edition of Aboth, note 11c, we'll refer to. Famous too, and solemn is the following, selection 138, Aboth 429 per book, page 198. R. Elasar Ha Kapar said, "They that are born are destined to die, and the dead shall be brought to life again, and the living to be judged, to know, to make known, and to be made conscious that he is God. He is the maker, he is the creator, he is the discerner, he the judge, he the witness, he the complainant, he it is that will in future judge. Blessed be he." Of 429 per book, page 198. Now, remember that the he is gender neutral, so yeah. God's ways and methods are often incomprehensible, but in the last resort, they are absolutely just. Note 11d, selection 139 from Mech, page 112, Mech, section 7, volume 1, page 248, Mech, folio 33a, and see our previous selections 7 and 8. R. Akiba used to argue with a man called Pappos, or Papias. Pappos, quoting Job 23:13, "Who can turn," or reply, "to him, and what he wishes, that he does," said, "Being one, he judges all the inhabitants of the world, and there is none who can reply to him." Akiba said, "Enough, Pappos. It is true that none can reply to him who spake and the world was, but he judges all in truth and in justice. Montefiore 6, folio 40a. So Mech 112, Mech 71248, Mech 33a. Selection 140 from Tunch B. Mishpathim 41b, finish. God says, all I do in justice. If I sought to pass beyond justice but once, the world could not endure. Then quoting the obscure verse, Isaiah 27:4, if I were to overstep justice by a single step, I should set all on fire, and the world would be burnt up. Tunch B. Mishpathim 41b, finish. God may be more indulgent towards a sin against himself than to a sin of a man against his neighbor. Selection 141 from NumR to Nassau 11:7. It is written, the Lord lift up his countenance upon thee, number 6:26, and also the Lord regards not persons, Deuteronomy 10:17. Now the Hebrew idiomatic wording for he regards not persons is he does not lift up his countenance. R. Jose B. Dosatai asked, how are these two statements to be reconciled? He lifts up his countenance, i.e. is lenient in a matter between you and him. He does not lift up his countenance. He is unbending in a matter between you and your neighbor. NumR, Nassau 11:7. But in how many Old Testament passages are we told of God's anger, of his jealousy, of his fierce punishments? And the rabbis had to regard all such passages as also divine and accurate. The Bible even seems to imply that God rejoices at the destruction or death of the wicked. The natural man of the rabbis tended to acquiesce, but attempts were made to rise above this conception. The first part of the following passage is quoted in every anthology. It must be confessed that it is isolated, but its influence was great. Selection 142, Meg 10b, CR selection 1313. In the future a bit. R. Johanan expressed the view that God does not rejoice in the downfall of the wicked. The ministering angels wanted to sing a hymn at the destruction of the Egyptians, but God said, my children lie drowned in the sea, and you would sing. R. Elazar said, he does not rejoice, but he causes others to rejoice. See RT, page 106, 214, and 262, Meg 10b. See also our selection 1313. This passage has influenced the liturgy. To this day, the Hallel is abbreviated on Passover. See the rubric on page 220 and 222, and 221 of the prayer book. In accordance with Proverbs 24:17, other reasons mentioned in the Arak 10a are discussed by Rabbi Jagwin, or is it Gagin? Gadjuin, on page 504 of his Keter Shemthob Midrash Proverbs on 25:21. If thine enemy be hungry, feed him, as even if he be coming to slay thee, then God will reconcile him to thee. Folio 25b, ed. Stettin, 1861. Similarly, in reading the book of Esther on Purim, the execution of the 10 sons of Haman is rushed through in one breath. The reason given is Meg 16b is inadequate. No doubt the object was to hurry over an unpleasant bit of history. Well, the other detail was the genocide of 78,000 innocent people, to which to this day, instead of Purim, there are some people in Iran who celebrate, and I think a couple adjoining countries or something like that, that celebrate surviving the massacre. So sort of, a Persian Holocaust Day. That's Holocaust Remembrance Day, something like that. For in the same way, only the initials of the 10 plagues and not the whole words were inscribed on the rod of Moses. Exodus R, Shemot 5, 6, 8, 3. And only the initials are recited in the domestic service of the Passover. For the usual explanations of this, see Abu Darham in Lok. For the one exception, the imprecatory psalms are absent from the synagogue liturgy, and even that exception does not apply to the Ashkenazi rite. The psalm in question, by the waters of Babylon, is read silently in the Sephardic rite before the evening service opens on the 9th of Ab, an occasion when the psalm is so appropriate that it can hardly be ignored, but many omit the last verses. Selection 260, and H.L. did this note. Obviously, C.G.M. did the others. The rabbis, with their vivid and abiding recollection of the words of the Bible, noticed that in one place where the phrase, "Give thanks unto the Lord, for his mercy endures forever," occurs, the usual words for "he is good" are wanting. This omission is in 2 Chronicles 20:21, in connection with the great destruction of Israel's enemies, who from the rabbi's point of view are identified with the wicked. Why are the words here omitted? Well, you see a mention of 74 biblical books. I think we're all referring to what they call the Old Testament. And these books, some of them are actually bigger than the Christian and Jewish sections of the Bible put together. Section 143, Mek Shorata Beshalach, Section 1, page 118, Mek, Volume 2, page 5. See also our selection 267 when we get to that. There is, if one may say so, no rejoicing before God at the destruction of the wicked. But if there is no rejoicing before him at the death of the wicked, how much less at the death of the righteous, of whom even one is worth the whole world? The burden of the ugly biblical passages is reflected in remarks which I summarize thus. 144, Ecclesiastes R7, section 16:1, folio 20b and C note 8. Be not righteous overmuch. Well, don't be an extremist, right? You fulfill the commandment, but you don't figure out a more difficult way of doing it, right? The rabbis use this verse to mean, try not to be more righteous than God. They had to meet criticism of the cruelties ordered by God. For example, in 1 Samuel 15:3, the Bible itself attempts, in Samuel's words, some sort of excuse in 1 Samuel 15:22, and the rabbis could only follow suit. Yet they saw the horror pretty clearly, for they make Samuel say, if the men have sinned, how have the women, the children, and the animals sinned? All they can do is repent. Seek not to be more righteous than your Maker. And again, he who is merciful when he should be cruel will be cruel when he should be merciful, which sounds well, but is really foolish. Even in spite of the example of Saul's cruelty to Nob, the city of the priests, 1 Samuel 22:19, the criticism which Saul is supposed to have made against the law of Deuteronomy 21:4, if the man sinned, what has been made the sin of the animal? is rebuked along with the same lines, but the very mention of the criticism is itself a moral and religious advance. It paved the way for the time when men could realize that deeds of senseless cruelty could not have been ordered by the good God. Section 119. Ecclesiastes R 7:16, folio 20b, C note 8. It is indeed not wonderful that the rabbis generally sought to concentrate all the cruel aspects of God's character in the Bible upon Israel's enemies. Nevertheless, attempts are made to teach that God in this too, unlike man, never loses control over his jealousy and anger. 145, Mech Bechodesh Yitro, section 6, page 226, Mech, volume 2, page 244, Exodus 25. I am a jealous God, so in the second commandment, I rule over jealousy, but jealousy does not rule over me. I rule over slumber, but slumber does not rule over me. With jealousy or with passion, I punish the idolaters for their idolatry, but in other matters, I am merciful. A philosopher said to R. Gamaliel, it is written in your law, I am a jealous God, but what is there in an idol to be jealous about? A strong man, a wise man, a rich man may be jealous in respect of another strong, wise, or rich man, but what is there in an idol to be jealous about? R. Gamaliel said, if a man calls his dog by his father's name, and if he makes a vow, saying, by the life of this dog, will the father be angry with the dog or with the son? God is angry with idolaters, not with idols. Mech Bechodesh Yitro 6, 226, Mech 2, 244, Exodus 20, verse 5. Section 146, Midrash Psalm on 94.1, 209a, section 1, cited RT, page 106. Man's anger controls him, but God controls his anger. He is a master of his wrath. Man's jealousy controls him, but God controls his jealousy. Midrash Psalm on 94.1, 209a, section 1, CRT, page 106. Selection 146 from Jen R. Weyera, 49.8, the page 507, 508. See also our selections 201 and 248 when we get to them. Genesis 18:24. Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? AV also in the Hebrew off. The same word means anger, wrath. So the Midrash, punning on the word, says, Arhuna, in the name of Acha, said, thou controllest anger, but anger does not control thee. Judah said, a mortal man is conquered by his anger, but God conquers anger. As it says, the Lord is a master of wrath. Nahum 1:2, literally the Hebrew merely means the Lord is wrathful. See AV and RV. Jen R. Weyera, 49.8, the page 507, 508. See 201 and 248 when we get to that. The burden of such metaphors and conceptions as those of Deuteronomy 32, 41, and 42 lay heavy upon the rabbis, and we can pass them by, for our conception of God is other than theirs. To the rabbis, being part of the Pentateuch, they were as perfect and as divine as any other verses in the Bible, yet sometimes by a little touch, they do what they can. 148, Sephirah, Deuteronomy, Ha as a new, 331, folio 140a. We may note also passages like the following. 149, the righteous knows the soul of his beast. Proverbs 12:10, God is righteous, the righteous one of the world. He knows even the soul of his beast. Nay, even when he is angered, for his attributes are not those of man. A king sends his legions against the rebellious province and devastates it, slaying good and bad alike. There is none to say, so and so is loyal, spare him. He slays them all, but not so God. Should an entire generation rebel and arouse his wrath? If there be but one righteous man there, he saves him, as it says, the righteous knows the soul of his beast. Or again, good is the Lord as a refuge in the day of distress. He knows those that trust in him. Nahum 1:7. Tunch B. Noach 18a is 149. The words in Deuteronomy 148. 150. God does not withhold the due reward of any of his creatures, even of a mouse which preserved its family and mated with its kind, not like the men of the generation of the flood who were promiscuous. Tunch B. Noach 18b. Selection 111 and 124 might be looked at. And selection 151, Tunch Shemot, section 20, folio 88b. When God sent Moses on his mission to deliver Israel, he said, I have seen, twice in one verse, Exodus 3:7. Literally seen, I have seen, i.e., I have indeed seen. Two things, said God, have I seen. I have seen Israel's sufferings, and I redeemed them now. And furthermore, I have also seen this people to be stiff-necked. They are destined to provoke me by making the golden calf, yet I redeemed them nonetheless. Tunch Shemot 20, folio 88b. 152. God is not a man that he should lie, or a mortal that he should repent. Numbers 23:19. Samuel, son of Nachmana, said, when God promises good, he does not change his promise, come what may. Unlike a mortal king who may withhold a promised gift to his son if the son provokes him, God keeps his promise in spite of man's sin. In Psalm 105:44, it says, he gave them lands of nations that they may keep his statutes. They did not keep his statutes, but he gave them the land. After the golden calf, God said to Moses, I am not a man to make a promise and retract. But when God swore in his wrath, he did not retract, for he swore to punish. For God said, I am not a mortal man to swear to punish and to exult in doing so. Tunch Wayera, section 13, folio 36a, fin to 36b, initial. 153, because Ham's eyes gazed at his father's nakedness. Ham's eyes were reddened because his mouth told of it. His lips were made curved because he turned his face to gaze again. His hair and beard became singed because he did not cover his father's nakedness. He went naked and shamed, for God's principle is measure for measure, but since God's mercies are over all his words. Psalm 145, verse 9, God went back on Ham's punishment and said, since he has delivered himself over to slavery, let him go free in return for the eye which saw and the mouth that spake. For a slave is released if his master injures his eye or his tooth. Exodus 21:26. Tunch Noach, section 13, folio 21b. Now, in the Islamic vision, you have something a little bit different, that the cause and effect regarding to any decision is known, and we're shown hereafter that sort of thing, that, hey, this is what could have happened. Whether you're good or bad, you're shown, this could have been the case. And of course, not all bad things in this world are considered as divine punishment per se. It's, opportunity through difficulty to have merit and reward. And also, not everything is a moral impact as such. Although, it's better to deal with the consequences in this world than the next, right? 154, bearer 7a. Is there ever anger before the Holy One? Blessed is he. Yes, for there is a teaching, a God that has indignation every day. Psalm 7:12. But how long does his anger last? A moment. Psalm 30, verse 6. And how long is a moment? The minutest fraction of time, literally an hour. Bearer 7a, selection 155, Tunch B, Balak 69a, Fin. When Balaam went with the princes of Moab against God's will, God was angry, and the angel of the Lord stood in his path as an adversary against him. Numbers 22, verse 22. Thus, angel of mercy turned into an adversary. So God says to the sinner, Thou hast caused me to take up a trade that is not mine. Tunch B, Balak 69a, finished. It does die that God turned back on his decision. That doesn't that's not a universal idea, but it is biblical. But perhaps that's one of those insertions of the rabbis. 156, Tunch B, Shemini 11a. Before he brought on the flood, God himself kept 7 days of mourning, for he was grieved at heart. Genesis 6:6, Tunch B, Shemini 11a. Whatever befalls themselves or Israel or the world, the rabbis are convinced believers in the unfailing justice and loving kindness of God. Because remember, the theme of love is a lot more strong and tonic than it is in Biblia, before it got joined to tonic. Well, they came up with a version. People talk about the Septuagint, and it's like, no, the Septuagint that we have is the Catholic one, not the Jewish one. 157, Lev R, Kadoshim 24:2. R. Berechiah said in the name of R. Levi, It is written, Thou, O Lord, art ever on high. Psalm 92, verse 8. That is, Thou art always right. Literally, forever is thy hand raised. If a king among men sits in judgment, when he acquits, all the people praise him. When he condemns to death, none praises him, for they know he has given sentence in passion or blindness. But with God, it is not so. Whether he remits or punishes, he is always just and right. R. Chuna, in the name of R. Acha, quoted Psalm 101, verse 1, I will sing of mercy and judgment unto thee, O Lord, will I sing. David said, Be it one way or the other, i.e., whether God acquits or condemns me, to thee, O Lord, will I sing. So the rabbis, quoting Psalm 116, verses 3, 4, and 13, say, Be it this way or that, I will call on the name of the Lord. Probably that's a mistranslation of Yahweh, increasing existence. God is verb and noun, establishing established. R. Judah, B. Eli, quoted Job 1:21. The Lord gave, the Lord took. May the name of the Lord be blessed. If he gave in mercy. If he took in mercy. Lev R. Kadoshim 24:2.